Hello dear students, I am Dr. Shikha Pandey, Associate Professor from Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today I am going to discuss about the topic that is carbon sequestration and carbon credit. So this topic is very much important and it is very much relevant with the climate change. That's why we are studying this topic, that is carbon sequestration. So first of all, it is also known as carbon capture and storage. So capturing of carbon is called as carbon sequestration. If we'll talk about it's a general meaning, like carbon storage of carbon into anywhere is called as carbon sequestration. So it is a geoengineering technique for a long-term storage of carbon dioxide for the mitigation of global warming. So this is a kind of a geoengineering technique into which we'll store the carbon dioxide for the mitigation of global warming, because we already know global warming is due to greenhouse effect. So carbon dioxide is the main gas that is responsible for this greenhouse effect. So what this carbon dioxide we will do in this carbon sequestration, we'll store it in a geoengineering technique, in a geological sequestration is there, sometime in ocean, sometime in soil, sometime in forest. So storage of carbon dioxide into any natural sink for the mitigation, for the reduction of this global warming is called as carbon sequestration. So that if we'll talk about the data, that is more than 33 billion tons of carbon emission has been occurred. So for today's now, more than 33 billion tons of carbon emission is there. That is annual worldwide that has been occurred. So that next point is that carbon we can sequester or we can store carbon in different way, like in a plant or soil, that is called as terrestrial sequestration or carbon sink. It can be denoted as a carbon sink also. Underground or geological sequestration, that is deep in ocean, it is called as ocean sequestration. And next is the as a solid material, like it is research is going on this topic, like as a solid material, how to store the carbon. So first of all, carbon is stored in plants or soil, that is called as terrestrial sequestration. So, and it is also called as carbon sink. And plant and soil is a greater sink, is a bigger sink of this carbon sequestration. Like that, underground sequestration is a geological sequestration, that is storage of carbon deep inside the ocean, that is called as ocean sequestration. So now comes to next point, that is a definition. What will be this related definition of this carbon sequestration and storage? So it occurs when carbon dioxide is absorbed by trees, plants and crop through the process of photosynthesis and stored as carbon in biomass such as tree trunks, branches, foliage, roots, as well as in the soil. So that is a natural sink of carbon dioxide, natural sink, that we can call as natural sink for this carbon dioxide, for CO2. This is called as carbon sequestration and storage. Means it's storage at a place so that the amount of carbon that is present in the atmosphere, it may be going to be reduced. So if we'll talk about its storage, as we know, plants is doing the process that is called as photosynthesis, and in this process photosynthesis, they stored as carbon in biomass. They will store carbon in biomass, like biomass, what the biomass of trees, like tree trunks, branches is there, foliage is there and roots is there. So as well as in the soil also. So this we can say that they are the natural sink of carbon. Means carbon can be stored in a biomass of a tree. So the tree biomass refers to the tree trunks, tree leaf, foliage, roots, etc. And according to the IPCC, as we already know, IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has given something about this carbon sequestration, is that by forestry, by the process in the forest or in agriculture alone is very much significance, that will help in the offset CO2 emission that contribute to global warming and climate change. So this IPCC has given data view on this carbon sequestration, because due to carbon sequestration, the global warming, we can mitigate the global warming, and we can reduce this global warming, because the only reason this carbon dioxide is the mainly responsible for this greenhouse effect. So by this, what the IPCC has told about this carbon sequestration, that it is a, if we'll do by forestry or agriculture alone, it will helps in the offset of CO2 emission that contribute to global warming and climate change. So what we have to think about this, alone the forest and crops and soil is responsible for the storage of carbon dioxide. Means if we'll plant more tree will absorb carbon dioxide into it, and this will be leads to the mitigation of global warming. That's why plantation is very much important, because tree alone is capable of absorbing this carbon dioxide into its biomass or leaf. And with regard to global sequestration, the IPCC has estimated that 110 billion tons of carbon over the next 50 years could be sequestered through food, forest preservation only, tree plantation, and improved conservation-oriented agriculture management. So, as per the IPCC, what they have told about this carbon sequestration, that you can store almost 110 billion of carbon over the coming next 50 years, and that could be sequestered in the forest, like forest preservation, tree planting, and improved conservation oriented agriculture management. So this was about the carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is very much helpful in the mitigation of carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is only responsible for the greenhouse effect, and greenhouse effect will leads to global warming, and global warming will leads toward the climate change. So for this only responsible thing is the carbon dioxide. So it's a proper utilization, or to mitigate this global warming, this carbon dioxide absorption or storage is very much important, and only forestry and agriculture has the capacity to absorb more and more amount of carbon dioxide. That's why the sustainable agriculture and conservation oriented agriculture management, or sometimes tree plantation, will lead toward the mitigation of global warming due to sequestration of carbon in the trees biomass. So in this way, we can say that only solution of this climate change is to plant the tree, more and more amount of tree, because this tree have the capacity to store more and more amount of carbon. Next is the types of carbon sequestration. If we will talk about this type of carbon sequestration, so first one is the soil. Soil is also a natural sink of carbon sequestration. So it is estimated that soil contain between 700 gigatons and 3000 gigaton of carbon, or more than 3 times of the amount of carbon stored in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. This soil has a capacity to absorb mostly 700 gigaton and 3000 gigaton of carbon, or sometimes more than it amount of carbon that is present in the atmosphere. So that's why this soil, we can say that soil is a natural sink of carbon, and it has a more capacity to absorb soil or to store soil in it. Next is the plant sequestration. So what a plant is doing, plant uses sunlight to convert CO2 from the atmosphere to carbohydrate, and their growth and maintenance by the process is called as photosynthesis. Plant is using sunlight, and by the process of photosynthesis, they are making their own food, and in this way they are converting CO2 from the atmosphere to carbohydrate and natural growth and maintenance. In this way, plant is utilizing the CO2 that is present in the atmosphere. CO2 is utilizing this plant in the atmosphere to absorb all this carbon dioxide. So natural terrestrial biological sink of carbon dioxide already sequester about 1/3 of CO2 emission from fossil fuel consumption. So what this plant is doing, they are already sequestering, they are already storing the amount of carbon dioxide that is generated. So if they are already storing the amount of CO2 that is already present on the earth's surface, so the natural way of storage of this carbon dioxide is about 1/3 of CO2 emission from fossil fuel consumption. So if we'll talk about ancient time, this is the natural way of nature. They can clean the environment. So everything in this nature has the capacity to clean by itself only. So before that, before the ancient period, when that much amount of CO2 is not there, that plants is doing, they are absorbing the CO2 and they are making the environment fresh. That's in this way the CO2 level has not crossed the limit. But now in this era, due to the deforestation also, due to globalization also, many reason is behind this carbon sequestration, because due to globalization more industries is there, and for the production of more industry, for many trees has been cut, so the amount of tree has been reduced, but the sources of CO2 emission has been increased. That's why this problem has occurred, because of that only. Because previously when fossil fuel, they will burn, that will automatically sequestered by the plant, and they convert it into, they will sequestered into its biomass. But now it's a tough, because the amount of trees has been reduced and the emission of CO2 has been increased. That's why this condition has occurred, and plant and soil is a natural sink of this sequestration of carbon. Next is the geological sequestration. So geological sequestration means the storage of greenhouse gas underground contact with the atmosphere. The most suitable site for deep geological formation are like depleted oils and natural gas filled, or deep natural reservoir filled with saline water, means saline aquifers, means storage in the aquifers. Aquifers means underground. So this is called a geo-sequestration, means the sequestration of carbon inside the earth surface, like into the saline water or saline aquifers, or some reservoir is there. And next is the ocean sequestration, means storage of carbon in the ocean. Because the ocean represents the largest carbon store on the earth. Ocean is representing the largest carbon storage on the earth. So before the industrial revolution, it contained 60 times as much carbon as the atmosphere and 20 times as much carbon as the land, vegetation and soil. So this was about the sequestration or storage of carbon into the ocean, because ocean is present in the very large amount, because of ocean represents the largest carbon store on the earth. Before the industrial revolution, it contains 60 times as much carbon as the atmosphere and 20 times as much carbon as the land, vegetation and soils. So because before this industrial revolution periods, that automatically this CO2 has been observed, some has been observed by absorbed by ocean, soil or forest. That's why this problem has not occurred. But nowadays situation is very changed. The revolution, industrial revolution is there, so more emission of CO2 is there and less amount of tree or soil is there, so they have not that much capacity to absorb carbon. Now comes to the next point, that is about the mineral sequestration. So mineral is also called as also known as mineral carbonation, that involve the reaction of CO2 with metal oxide that are present in common naturally occurring silicate rocks, and this process will mimic natural weathering phenomena and results in natural carbonate products that are stable on a geological time scale. So in mineral sequestration is again a process of mineral carbonation, which involves reaction of CO2 with metal oxide. This will be involve the reaction of carbon dioxide with metal oxide that are present in common. So naturally occurring silicates rocks are there. So this is called as mineral sequestration, means storage of carbon into the minerals, and that will be involved reaction of carbon dioxide with metal oxides. Next is this process will mimic natural weathering phenomena and results in natural carbonate products that are stable on a geological time scale. This mineral sequestration process generally mimic the natural weathering phenomena. As we know, natural weathering of rocks, they are mimic this formula on this phenomena, and the result is the natural carbonate products that are stable on a geological time scale. So this will be and it will be formed a natural carbonate products that are stable on a geological time scale. Next is how this terrestrial has been doing. The process of terrestrial carbon sequestration. So in which what will happen, this process, this terrestrial carbon sequestration involved the storage of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it is absorbed naturally through the process of photosynthesis and stored as carbon in biomass and soil. This is the natural process of absorbing carbon dioxide into the biomass or sometimes soil. That's why tropical deforestation is responsible for 20% of world annual CO2 emission. So this CO2 emission increase is only reason is a tropical deforestation, because it will help in reduce greenhouse gases in environment. So how to reduce these greenhouse gases in environment? Next we are going to discuss. See, in this picture you can see that this is the process of biological carbon dioxide sequestration. Soil organic matter is there. So by the process of soil respiration by microorganisms, CO2 will come, and this mineralization and humidification of carbon compounds by microorganism, and they will make the carbon soluble carbon compound and move downward. Then mineralization and immobilization of carbon compounds by microorganisms. By the process of mineralization or immunization, this carbon compounds has been done by the microorganisms, and then root cell respiration and death is there, and in this way this CO2 is again passed into the tree. In this way, this is a complete pathway of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, terrestrial atmosphere. How it will, from soil it will goes to the atmosphere, then again it will come back to the trees, and then again to the soil. And the various way to reduce greenhouse gases is, first of all, avoiding emission by maintaining existing carbon storage in trees and soil. Means emission we can avoid by maintaining existing carbon storage in trees and soil. Next is the increasing carbon storage by tree planting or conversion from conventional to conservation. Next is related with this reduction of greenhouse gases is the we can make the tillage practice on agriculture lands. On the agriculture lands, what we can do, we can make a tillage. So in this tillage, many little bit tillage is there on a normal cropland. Little bit tillage we can make, and this tillage will have the capacity to store more and more amount of carbon into it. So this was the way of reduction of greenhouse gases. Now this carbon sequestration rate for a plant is depends upon many factors. These are the factors that are responsible for the sequestration or storage of carbon into a tree. So first of all, species of tree. What tree species is there, that will be main factor of this carbon sequestration. Next is a type of soil. Which type of soil? Sandy soil, loamy soil, black soil, alluvial soil. Next is a regional climate. Like climate is also an important point. So that which type of climate, tropical climate or desert is there. So if a tropical climate is there, then obviously they have more greenery, so they can do better. Next is the topography and management practices. Topography of the area, like contour is there, which is there, and its management is important. Next is the example of it is pine plantation in SE United States can accumulate almost 100 metric tons of carbon per acre after 90 years. So this pine tree plantation in the United States has accumulated almost 100 metric tons of carbon per acre after 19 years. Next is the carbon accumulation eventually reaches saturation point where additional sequestration is no longer possible. This carbon accumulation have reached at a point which is saturated, which is already saturated, means what, where additional sequestration is no longer possible. So when tree reaches maturity and when the organic matter in soil builds up to original level before losses occur, means when a tree has reached to its maturity level, means aging is there in the tree, then they have not that much capacity to absorb carbon, and they are no longer possible to absorb more carbon dioxide. That's why this carbon accumulation, the age of tree is also important, type of soil important, species of tree is important. So what will happen after saturation? The tree or agriculture practices still needs to be sustained to maintain the accumulated carbon and prevent subsequent loss of carbon back to the atmosphere. So what means, if that tree has reached its maturity or its aging is there, so after that saturation point will come. So after this saturation point, the tree or agriculture practices still needs to be sustained, means you have to sustain it to maintain the accumulated carbon dioxide into the biomass of the tree to prevent its again loss into the atmosphere, so that it will not come back again into the atmosphere. So this is the main practices we should do. If a tree will reach at a saturation point, mean after maturation, the tree has not be able to store the carbon dioxide. But you can remove the tree, but it should be stored in a manner so that again that carbon dioxide does not come back into the environment. Means this will be a very important things we have to be in mind, because sequestration is important, and it's storage and at one place is also much important. So next is the geological carbon sequestration. Means it involves collecting and placing carbon dioxide into suitable underground formation. Means this will involve the collection or storage of CO2 into underground formation for storage, and this is called as geosequestration. Geosequestration is there, means the storage of carbon dioxide into underground formation of storage, like in small pores, oil fields, gas field, saline formation, unminable coal seams, and the saline filled basalt formation has been suggested as a storage site. So this will be a storage site for this carbon sequestration, because this geological sequestration is also much important, and its example is you can store in a small pore, sometime in oil fields, gas field, saline formation, unminable coal seams, and the saline filled basalt formation has been suggested as storage site. So these are the natural storage site, sink for the carbon storage. You can see in the picture here, CO2 storage is there, and injection is there, and through this transport and compression unit, then it's a CO2 capture and separation point is there, plant is there. And this picturization is showing about the different methods, different units to store the carbon, and its injection and its storage into the geological storage of this carbon. Next is what process is involved in this geological carbon sequestration. So many various physical method, like a highly impermeable cap rock is there, and geochemical trapping mechanism. It will prevent the CO2 from escaping to the surface. So these are the methods, like some physical method is there. They will prevent the carbon dioxide to escape out again into the atmosphere. It will be not mixed again with the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is sometimes injected into declining oil fields to increase oil recovery. It should be sometimes used or added into the oil fields to increase the recovery of oil. This option is very much attractive because the storage costs are offset by the sale of additional oil that is recovered. So this option is a good option to adopt this geological method of carbon sequestration, because the storage costs are offset by the sale of additional oil that should be recovered. Next is the ocean carbon sequestration. In carbon sequestration by direct injection of CO2 into the deep ocean, that will involve the process of capturing of carbon, then its separation of carbon, transportation and injection from land or tankers. You can see in the picture. So this sequestration, storage of carbon inside the ocean. Storage of carbon inside ocean. And 1/3 of CO2 emitted a year already enters the ocean. 1/3 of carbon dioxide that has been emitted in a year is already enters the ocean, and ocean has a more capacity, 50 times more carbon than the atmosphere. Ocean is already having more carbon than the atmosphere. Next is the how we'll calculate the amount of carbon dioxide that is sequestered. So first of all, as we know, carbon dioxide is composed of 1 molecule of carbon and 2 molecule of oxygen. That's why 1 molecule of carbon and 2 molecule of oxygen. 2 oxygen is there. And the atomic weight of carbon is 12. Okay. And the atomic weight of oxygen is 15. This is the atomic weight of carbon and oxygen. So the weight of CO2 is C plus 2 into O. C plus 2 into O is equal to 43.9. Okay. So the ratio of CO2 to C is 43.99 is divided by 12.00, so it will come 3.66. So therefore, to determine the weight of carbon dioxide sequestered in the tree, multiply the weight of carbon by the weight of the tree also. Then multiply the weight of carbon in the tree by 3.663. In this way, we can understand that how much amount of carbon is sequestered inside the plant, inside its biomass. So this is the good method to mitigate the global warming. Because of this global warming, carbon dioxide is only responsible for this global warming. Next point we are going to discuss is the carbon trading. Now, the carbon trading. Carbon trading is a process of buying and selling the carbon's credit or to emit carbon. As we know, carbon trading means buying or selling of carbon credits, carbon emission credit. So this will be a very new concept. Carbon emission credit means you can buy your credit to emit the carbon. So it is a very new phenomenon that has been originated to stop. If you want to produce carbon dioxide, you have to buy its credit limit. So it is an exchange of credits between nation that has been designated to reduce emission of carbon dioxide. So the carbon trade allow countries that have a higher carbon emission to purchase the right to release more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from countries that have lower carbon emission. So countries, they are exchanging the limits of carbon, because those nations that are designated to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide, they can allow the countries with higher emission to purchase the right. They can buy from those nations. They have the right to release less carbon emission. So they can buy from those nations. They have more capacity to release the more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Means, simple way, if we'll understand, this developed country means those nations that is already developed, they can buy carbon emission credits limits from the developing countries, because developing countries has more credit limit. They can generate more carbon emission than compared to the developed nation. So this is about the emission trading of carbon or exchange of credits between nation that has been designated to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide. And the carbon trade allow countries that have higher carbon emission. And now next point is that it has been a central pillar of European Union's effort to slow the climate change. Means this effort has been made by European Union to slow down the climate change, and the world's biggest carbon trading system in the European emission trading system is there. And carbon trading is increasingly criticized because carbon dioxide emission in industrialized countries are not declining at the necessary rate to avoid this catastrophic climate change. So this has been attracting more criticism. Because of that, developed, only this responsible behind this carbon emission is the developed country, those countries who are already developed, but they are not stopping their emission because they are buying it from the developing nations. They are buying the carbon credit limit emission from the developing nations. So in this way, they are the only responsible for this carbon emission. And if they are not stopping the use or this carbon emission, we cannot stop this climate change, because they are only responsible and they have money. They can buy the credit limits from already developing nation. So this is about the carbon trading. Is the exchange of transfer of trade on allowances. Next is the excess of unused allowance credit can be traded to the country whose emission has exceeded their assigned cap. Means it can be credited, it can be allowed to those countries they have exceeded their assigned cap, and this purchase allowance can be used to increase the allowance limit by the purchasing country. They can they can be used to increase the allowance limit by the purchasing country. Countries whose emission are less than their assigned amount or the cap can sell or trade the excess amount of countries whose emission have exceeded their assigned amount. So those countries whose emission are less than their assigned amount, or per capita sell or trade, the excess amount they can sell to those countries, they have their amount has been reduced. So this is called as carbon credit. Sometimes it may be useful, but most of the time it will be not a good solution for this climate change, because those country they are already developed, means they have already developed, they are emitting more CO2. So they can buy the limits from developing nation, means, and developing nation has allowed up to some limit, so they can utilize their, they can do the emission of carbon dioxide. So they are buying from these countries, and what will happen, developing nation will have some amount, so they can use their assigned amount of carbon dioxide emission. If they have excess of this kind of carbon emission, so they can sell it to those nation, those they have reduced the emission of carbon dioxide. If it will work properly, it work for this climate change, but nowadays it is not working properly, it will be not be a solution to climate change. And this offset credit for eco-friendly technology are purchased by developing nation to avoid or substitute reduction in their own emission. So this offset credit for eco-friendly technologies, they are purchased by developing nation to avoid or substitute reduction in their own emission. And investment in green technology and harness alternative forms of energy in the developing country. So for example, a landowner plants an acre of fields and they can generate credits for how much carbon dioxide is reduced as a result of the plantation. So this they can do. A landowner is there, they can plant an acre of field and they can generate credits for how much carbon dioxide is reduced as a result of plantation. The credits are known as offset credits. This credit is his offset credit, means it is a eco-friendly technology. Offset credits means those technology that is eco-friendly. So this eco-friendly technologies can be purchased by developed nation to avoid the substitute reduction in their own emission. Then the landowner can sell the offset credits to the potential investor on industrial facilities. So after planting, generating more and more amount of carbon dioxide plants, they will have the capacity for this plantation, and in this way they will develop their own credit limits. This is called as offset credit. So the landowner can sell the offset credit to the potential investor or industrial facilities. So in this way, they can sell to the offset credit to the potential investor on industrial facility. This facility can buy the offset credits and count it in the favor of its emission responsibilities. So this can be counted in the favor of its emission responsibility also. It attests that the same amount of carbon dioxide is reduced in the atmosphere as a result of the plantation process. Means in this way, we can understand that plantation is the only solution for the reduction of climate change or mitigation of climate change. So this is about the carbon offsetting. In this way, any landowner can plant many of trees into an acre of field, and they can absorb the carbon credits into the plant, and then this landowner can sell the offset credits to the potential investor or industrial facilities, and this facility can buy the offset credits and count it in the favor of its emission responsibilities. And now it is going to attest that the same amount of carbon dioxide is reduced in the atmosphere. In this way, as a result of it, the plantation process is very much important for this carbon offset and the reduction in greenhouse gas emission. So how this greenhouse gas emission has been reduced is a main point. So stringency in the cap or the upper threshold limit is contributing to lower emission over the years. This stringence in the cap or the upper threshold limit is contributing to lower emission over the years, and sources of revenue for developing nation. It is also a source of income. Source of income for the developing nation, and developing nation can earn revenue by selling carbon credit to the countries with more fossil fuel demand. Exactly, it is a benefit for the developing nation, because Developing nation can earn revenue by selling carbon credits to the those countries who have more fossil fuel demanded, and it will support a free market system. Means those who want to sell, they can sell; those who want to buy, they can buy, and in this way, all developing nation can generate some revenue. And the carbon trade market is without any economic intervention and regulation by government, except to regulate against a fraud benefit of carbon trading status for alternative source of energy and green technology. So that this market is without any economic intervention and regulation by the government, it will going to regulate against force or fraud benefit of carbon trading for the alternative source of energy and green technology. So it will be stop this fraud benefit of carbon trading against this alternative sources of energy or some green technology. Next is the disadvantage related with carbon trading. So what is the disadvantages against this carbon offsetting or carbon trading? So it will allow a right to pollute the environment. It will gives you right to pollute the environment. If we understand it is in simple word, it will give you right to pollute your environment. Industries in the ratified nation are purchasing legal right to pollute the atmosphere. Means those have more money, they can pollute the atmosphere. More money, they can pollute the atmosphere. Atmosphere, it is a slow process also, and it will gives you a right to pollute the environment, because if you have a money, if you are a ratified nation, you have a purchasing legal right to pollute the environment. Industries are opting the easy way to purchase more allowance than implementing greenery technology. This is the very important point. Means industries is shifting toward the buying and purchase this carbon credit limits. They are not implementing green technologies. Means we should encourage them. It will discourage the implementation of green technologies. Lack of centralized system on global framework, absence of centralized and accept global standards are missing. No effective carbon reduction in the atmosphere. In this way, no reduction of carbon dioxide. No reduction of carbon dioxide. If we can do in this way, it will leads to the carbon reduction in one place and results in carbon emission of some other place. Means carbon will reduce at one place and emission will be increased into some other place. So, what conclusion we can make by this lecture is that carbon trading brings forth financial incentive to reduce carbon dioxide emission and implement eco-friendly green technologies. So, what this green technology? Plantation is there. Next is the stringent assignment of caps or the upper threshold limit over the years can ameliorate the greenhouse gas emission problem. This can stop or reduce the GHG problem, greenhouse gas problem. So, or the alternative or renewable source of energy like wind, solar, hydro are supposed to get financial boost to substitute the fossil fuel. Means this should be encouraged due to this financial boost. The renewable sources of energy has been encouraged. And the next point is the absence of a standard measuring techniques in carbon sequestration or storage. Question of feasibility of carbon offsetting technique also. Presently, the market is primarily driven by financial interest or gains by the investment firms are opposed to seeking environmental remedy. So this conclusion we can make with this carbon offsetting or carbon trading or carbon sequestration. Because carbon trading has been allowed to the developing nation, they can buy their own credit limits to emit the carbon emission of this carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In this way, if we'll talk like this global climate change problem or global warming problem has not been reduced, because it has been given you a right to pollute the environment. If you are capitalized country, if you have a more amount of money, you can buy your emission to pollute the environment. In this way, this way will not be achieved. And sometimes if we'll talk about the positive side of this carbon trading, it will encourage the plantation of tree. it will encourage the use of these alternative sources of energy like wind energy, solar energy, and hydropower energy, and it will get financial boost also, and it will sometimes assignment of caps or upper threshold limit over the years that can ameliorate the greenhouse emission problems. So that this at presently the market is primarily driven by the financial interest or gain by the investment firms and opposed to seeking environmental remedy. So that this way they will provide the environmental remedy also. So this lecture was about carbon sequestration and carbon trading. Thank you for today's lecture.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.